This is Share Life Today. Hi, I'm John Sorensen. And, every year about this time, the skeptics and naysayers just seem to come out of the woodwork trying to debunk Jesus Christ, his claims, who he is, what he came to do. And yet, there are hundreds of biblical prophecies that Jesus Christ fulfilled that confirm what we believe. So joining me today to talk about this is Dr. Jerry Newcombe. He's a speaker, he's an author, he's a radio and television host, and he's also my friend. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you, John. Good to be with you.
Now, Jerry, you co-authored 16 books with Dr. D. James Kennedy, who started a number of ministries, but one of those was Evangelism Explosion. He's our founder. And one of those books that you wrote with Dr. Kennedy is What If Jesus Had Never Been Born? What have you seen happen with that book?
Well, I'm excited to say that, in a sense, it helped unleash a new version of apologetics in our time. When Jesus Christ came into planet Earth, life was very cheap, and he elevated the value of human life because of Christ's influence. For example, the gladiator games were stopped. Now, can you imagine this? I think boxing is cruel, and cage fights and things like that. But when Jesus was born, he was born into a world in which human beings literally would kill each other for sport, and they were forced to do it because they were slaves, fighting unto death. But because of Christ's influence, that was eventually taken away. Slavery in the ancient world was done away with because of Christian influence. When it came back in the modern world, it was again Christian influence that ultimately caused its death knell through the evangelicals like William Wilberforce and others fighting this terrible evil. People forget all these things. Education for the masses was first created as a Christian phenomenon for the masses because of Christianity. And in fact, a lot of languages were first set to writing in the first place. There was a spoken tongue, but they had never been written down until Christian missionaries took the time to actually create an alphabet and to get that language written down. Hundreds of languages were first set to writing because of Christianity, to translate the Bible or portions thereof.
Jerry, I can tell you this, as a missionary myself, somebody who goes to many places around the world, I can tell you of days that I've walked down pathways in Africa and in Indonesia and places, and I can tell you this, I am so grateful for the days that missionaries came to these spots before me, because bringing the gospel of Jesus Christ has changed everything about those cultures. And,
That's so true. In fact, there's a great quote from James Russell Lowell that we have in the book where he says, I challenge any skeptic to find any 10 square mile spot on this planet where they can educate their children, where women are treated with respect and dignity, and old age is honored, where the gospel of Jesus Christ has not gone first.
Hasn't gone first. Yeah, amen, amen. Well, in the opening, I mentioned that this is a time of year when skeptics just seem to come out of the woodwork. And now you run into quite a few of these, being in your position and whatnot, these so-called experts that seem to be behind so many of these documentaries and books that are out there that really call into question Jesus Christ. Talk about this a little bit, please.
There are different worldviews in conflict, and if you have a starting point, as many of these skeptical scholars do, if you have a starting point that miracles are not even possible, then you can't look at the Gospels, for example, with any kind of objectivity. You can't read about Jesus Christ and what he did on planet Earth, which we're still talking about. If you start from the perspective that miracles are not possible, you cannot possibly read Jesus Christ and the Gospels correctly. And that's what these people do. And ultimately, there are many reasons for unbelief, but I look at it this way. Jesus said, light has come into the world, but men prefer darkness because their deeds are evil. Now, I don't know what it is that causes or motivates some scholar towards skepticism, but I will say this. A lot of the institutions, many of which were formerly Christian, Harvard, for example, was started to train congregational ministers in the Christian faith, and Yale and Princeton and Dartmouth and all the great schools were started for Christian purposes by Christian money, Christian donations, Christian hard work, etc. And today they're churning out unbelievers, unfortunately. But the bottom line is you got to be careful even what seminaries you go. Dr. Kennedy even tells a story, John, that when he went to seminary, He said half the professors were believers in Jesus Christ and the Bible. The other half were unbelievers. He said, I felt like I was taken and just thrown off of a dock into water, and I was just treading water. And he said it was the witness of the early church. It was men like Polycarp, genuine men of history who affirmed what the previous generation, the apostles, had passed on to them, that made him realize this thing is so rooted in history that you really, honestly, if you're an objective scholar, you will have to be an agnostic when it comes to ancient history if you rejected the witness of the New Testament. And unfortunately, that's what many of these scholars are. They're agnostics when it comes to Christianity, and they apply a standard, a criterion on the New Testament that is so rigorous that no first century document or series of documents
could survive that. No, couldn't possibly. You'd have to do away with all of what we know of recorded history if you were to deny these things are true.
And I'll tell you what, there's a secular historian named Will Durant who died many years ago, but he wrote a whole series of books, The Story of Civilization, and he said that when these historians or theologians, throw out Jesus, he said by the same criterion they do that, they would have to throw out all sorts of worthies from ancient history. They're just being, they're applying something that's an incorrect standard. And they, as I say, they'd have to be historical agnostics to throw out Jesus in the Gospels.
Well, thank you so much for encouraging us today, Jerry. And folks that are watching this, I hope that this encourages you as you share life with your friends and with your relatives, with your work associates, with your neighbors, and yes, even with strangers that you meet today. And our prayer would be that you'd always be able to be a bold witness for Christ. And if you'd like more information, there will be a link on our Share Life Today website where you can see about how you can get a copy of the book that Jerry's speaking of right now. And also you'll find lots of other witnessing tips and tools that will help you to share your faith. That's sharelife.today. So please go there today, and God bless you as you do. And thank you, Jerry, for joining us today.
Thank you, John. And let me just say, Merry Christmas.
God bless you.